Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show, live in the On Purpose Woman magazine and global community Facebook page. I'm Ginny Robertson, one of the hosts of the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show, and I'm also the founder and publisher of On Purpose Woman magazine and the founder of the On Purpose Woman global community. I have an exciting show planned for you today. I'm here with four fabulous wise women who were all born in a different decade, and we'll be talking about aging with purpose. So, hello, ladies. Thank you for being here.
Hi.
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 So I'm excited to get into our conversation. But before we do, just take about 30 seconds or so and tell our audience a little bit about you. And I'm going to start with Miss Imaja.
Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to participate and be a part of this. I am Dr. Imaja Jubilee. I am a poet, songwriter, inspirational speaker, and I love to live my life in joy and flow through it with grace and ease, no matter what is happening.
Thank you. And let me just say, if you're watching this on a recording, we didn't go live because of some snafus. And right when I'm going, this has never happened before, Imaja says. And right after that, Sophia came up with a solution. Isn't that interesting? We had to calm down first. So thank you. Glad you're here.
Yeah,
How about you, Maria?
I'm Maria Darby. I'm at Keswick and focused really on helping all of us make good choices to live well, age well, and be well.
Thank you.
And I am in my 50s.
Amanda.
Hi, I'm Amanda Schwarz. I do digital marketing through my company called Menda Digital. But when I'm not doing that, I'm managing house stuff and kids stuff and family stuff and my own writing and my own singing and stuff like that. I am in my 40s.
And Sophia.
Hi, I'm Sophia Wren, and I'm a writer and entrepreneur, and I work with sensitive mermaids who want to write and create for their book or business. And I'm passionate about helping people tap into their intuition and creative genius.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Sophia, I'm going to start with you. When you heard the words living with purpose, aging with purpose, aging with purpose, what did that mean to you?
Wow. Well, when I first heard it, I get that sense of like awareness, that like there's a clock that's ticking and I'm like, okay, I got to do this. Yeah. It also reminded me how I'm 34 now and I'm in this kind of weird position where I actually am older than my mom lived to be. And my dad actually just passed at 57, which is kind of young. And so I have such a strange outlook on where the life journey and how long we have and what do you do with it? And should you be thinking ahead? Should you live in the moment? Like, it's very complex.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Those are great answers. I love it. And you, Amanda?
Well, it's interesting what Sophia had to say, because I think that my journey into acknowledging the fact that I was aging and things were changing happened when my father passed. And Sophia, I'm so sorry for the passing of your father. Mine was 62, and it happened right around my mid 30s. And I think that it really did cause a seismic shift in the way I felt about my life and about the things that were important. And that's when everything kind of shifted, where I'm like, you know what, I'm doing this, none of this matters. And I have to figure out what really matters to me to make me feel like I'm doing something that's more fulfilling and life-giving. But yeah, when you're in your 30s, it's like, well, how much has passed and how much is to come and what does this mean? And it carries on into your 40s. It's fantastic.
And does it carry on into your 50s, Maria?
So my mom passed away when she was 42 and I was 18. And so people like when they turn 40 have these moments and I was like, yeah, that's not a big deal to me. But when I turned 43, so when I lived past my mom, it was a whole different world for me. It was like, okay, well, phew, made it through, right? And so and I used to think like, I feel like it does make you think about life differently. But I would tell you, my 50s are the best. And I used to hear from people saying like that when I was younger and I was like, oh yeah, right, whatever. But I feel like I am in my best self in all the ways that you might define that. I just turned 55 2 weeks ago and I'm loving life. Life is good. And I know what I value. And, I feel like I don't know, I just think it's sort of a great time to be, but it does make you think if half my life is gone and half my life is ahead of me, like, what does that look like? You know, what are the choices we make that prepare for those next decades, whatever they can be. And lots of good choices out there, which is so different than when I think when many generations ago, in terms of what were choices for women, particularly.
Yeah, I love all these different perspectives. Thank you. It's exactly what I was hoping for. And Imaja, how about you?
Well, I feel that this has been a joyous path that I've decided to be on. And I never realized that I was aged until I was 62. I am 75. And what happens for me right now is I did not learn to do what I love until I was 64. Now stop trying to find a job. So now I feel like I got a whole new lease on living, and it's about creating. It's always about creating and being and living with joy and happiness from the inside out. My great grandmother lived till she was 105 years old. And my grandmother lived till she was 94 on my dad's side, till she was 94. And my grandmother on my mother's side, she died when she was in her 50s. She wasn't even 60. But what makes this phenomenal for me is that I know that I have broken ancestral patterns, and that's what motivates me and keeps me moving forward. And I feel the circle of support that I'm getting from my ancestors.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. And what I love about all of your answers, we have Sophia, who's in her 30s, and she's an entrepreneur and a writer. She's doing what she wants to do, at least for this point in time, right? When I was your age, Sophia, I was still doing that corporate grind, still, following the rules and all of that. So I'm always so excited to see younger women taking this on and doing what they feel like doing. And Amanda, you're juggling motherhood and wifehood and entrepreneurship and taking care of yourself and all of this in your 40s. And and you figured out this way to do it the way it works for you right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the keys, the way it works for each of us individually right now, that there are no more rules. There are no more, they're there, but we don't have to follow them. How do you feel about that, Maria?
I think, I was with a group of people the other day, and we were trying to, what is older? Like when someone says you're older, what does that mean? And we determined that it's 10 years older than however old I am. Like, we started asking people in the group, there was all different kinds of ages in different random ways. And they said, well, somebody was 50 and they're like, oh, 10 years from now. And somebody was 70 and they're like, 10 years from now. It's like always that. And I think it is because the rules have changed. And I think, as Yamal just said, it's really about saying, what do I want? Like, when do I feel like I'm free to make those choices? And then that's how I can define a better and more interesting life for that moment, because it could look different. 10 years from now, your choices might be different, your goals might be different, and you'll adjust to those. And that freedom to do that, when you experience freedom, whatever that looks like in terms of your choices, I think that it allows us to be our best selves, which allows us to age with purpose. Because now it's not about aging, it's about the purpose piece, right? When we focused on the purpose, you could be 30, you could be 70, you could be 130. It's about having that purpose that drives us, gives us a reason to get out of bed in the morning. And that's why I feel like for me in my 50s I'm like, okay, not everyone's going to like me. I'm good with that. Like, I'm past the part of where everyone has to love me. Like, I'm past, like, I know my worth, both personally and professionally. And I'm okay to speak up about that in a way that I was not in my 30s. And I'm so respectful of younger people now who can do that in a way that I never could. I feel like I just learned that in the last 5 years. So I'm always better for doing it for others. So I feel like there's moments, right? And the turning place for you individually could be 30, somebody else is going to be 70. It's about when you've determined your purpose for that time, then you're living well.
Yeah. It's never too late to be who we might have been. I really do believe that. I can't give credit to the person who said that, though it wasn't me, and I don't remember who said it. But I know when I hit 40, I've never really minded a decade. I've always said, oh, I'm going to be the next age. But when I hit 50, I was good. When I hit 60, and then I thought, well, maybe 70 is when I'm going to start to feel older. And I hit 70 in October, and I was really okay with it. But the thing that kind of grabbed me was 80 in 10 years. And that it didn't seem wrong. It just seemed like, how could that possibly have happened? How could I have lived that many years already? So I'm just at this place, it's that, unless I'm really great, unless I get like rejuvenated and somebody gives me another lifetime right here, right now, I've got less time in front of me than behind me. But you know what? I could have had that at 30 and not known it. So we don't know how much time we have in front of us. So we just need to live every day as though we've got all the time and none of the time. You know,
And see,
just,
that's what's important, Jenny, is living in the moment.
yeah.
Be in the moment and be of the moment and not of the world. That's where I live from. And
Mhm.
each breath that I take each morning that I am awakened, it's a great day to be alive. So that's the way I look at it.
It's
Right.
true.
That's right. I adore you and your attitude, Imaja. Thank you. Thank you for showing up here today. I had emailed all of you a little bit about something I've been reading, and I want to read a little bit more about it. And I want to talk about this because I'm fascinated by it. A person named Gene Cohen wrote a book in 2006 called The Mature Mind, The Positive Power of the Aging Brain. And he identified 4 phases of aging. And as I read these 4 phases, after I finish reading them, I'd love for you all to jump in and see if anything speaks to you. Like if you're in a particular phase right now, does that seem accurate? Or if you were in a phase, how did that feel? Or how do you feel about the next phase coming up? And just note too that these overlap quite a bit. They're not like, 30 to 40 and 40 to 50. There's a lot of overlap, which is really exciting and should be because we're all different human beings. So we're going to do it all differently. But phase 1 is called Midlife Reevaluation, and that's ages 30s to mid-30s to mid-60s, which is interesting. Phase 1 is a period of quest more than crisis. Where have I been? Where am I now? Where am I going? Phase 2, liberation, late 50s into the 70s, a time of experimentation and innovation. And I guess if the later we are coming into our own anyway, we could be experiencing these like within a year, all of these phases, right? Or within 5 years, because I'm thinking about that now, that I was probably in liberation. I started liberation in my 40s, even though this says late 50s, but I stayed there a long time, Phase 3 is summing up, ages late 60s through the 80s. It's a time of review and resolution and heralds a desire to give back. And then phase 4, the final phase, encore, which I love, ages late 70s until the end of life. The need to remain vital can lead to new manifestations of creativity and social engagement that makes this period full of surprises. Isn't that uplifting and exciting?
Yes, it is.
So,
And I like the last phase that you just said, Jenny,
Mhm.
is where I feel like I learned in Science of Mind that when we stop creating, we stop living, because we were created by source, energy, or whatever you want to call it, and it creates. So when you stop creating, you stop living. You can be 30 and stop living. You can be 20 and stop living. But now I feel it took me a while to recognize my gift of creativity. So I just say, go for it and create. I know that I'm alive. I know that what I bring forth, it does make a difference through my poetry, through speaking up and owning my voice. That is not just for me, it's for the highest good of all, not just for Imaja Jubilee. So that's the way I feel about it.
Thank you. Perfect for that time. And I think, phase 3, reviewing and resolving and a desire to give back, that just goes right into the next phase, which is all about this, being who we really are finally in the best way, because I think we've all been in that phase of who are we, what matters, and there's different variations of that. And the older I've gotten, the more courageous I've gotten about being her. And about, Maria mentioned that it's just been in the last few years that you were able to just really not care as much about what people think. And it takes courage, it takes resolve, it takes doing it over and over and over again, practice. And yet there's a moment in time when you realize, wow, that didn't trigger me at all. I don't feel like I want to slash somebody right now. I don't even feel the need to respond, I don't even have to respond to whatever that was. I don't know where that came from. I never talk like that. But anybody else want to say anything? Let me stop.
I think
I'm not a violent person.
the piece I think for me was when I started to really be okay with who I was. So the part of being able to be comfortable with yourself and the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Whatever that is, allows you to sort of say, yeah, I'm doing this thing, I don't like it, or I'm okay with this piece. I've learned to sort of adjust and I'm okay. Or and then this is what I'm passionate about, and I can take some risks to make that happen. I mean, and I know there has to be some sense of security, whatever that looks like for people, whether that's economic security, relationship security. You have to feel in a safe place to feel like you have those choices. And I think that health really plays into that, right? There's however you want to define health, mental health, physical health, social health, all of that, is that you have to have, if you focus on those, the earlier you focus on those in the completeness, not just one or the other, then you enter the next decade or the next phase with more choices. Because I sort of equate, maybe it's because of the work that I do, equate like the wholeness of your health and all the ways you define that into having choices to be more active or pursue a new career, engage in a new activity, or enter a new relationship, because your health, which is sort of your basic sense of being, is in a good place. And sort of that opens up fields of possibility that I just never really even thought was an option, right? In terms of like, you work, you do this for a certain amount of time, you go to school, you get married, you have a job, you have kids, you do whatever, and never really thought about whether those were the choices I wanted to make, until it sort of happened. And then when things happened or didn't happen in those areas, it allowed me to say, like, what do I want to do about that? And then how do I want to engage in, if not, then what, right? What's the next piece? And I think that sort of balancing that allows you to really engage in the parts that resonate with you and say, not for the things that don't. And that freedom that comes with being able to say, is a good thing. Like it opens up the world for other places to create, to engage, to love, to challenge, whatever, to fit into that empty space. Because you've gotten rid of the thing, the should-haves, the could-haves, the would-haves, and filled it with the possibility, which I think is what aging well means, and what I hope to do for the next many more decades, since I've also broken the age barrier in my family in terms of some of the longevity of my, those who came before me, makes me feel like there's possibility in a way that maybe that I didn't feel before.
No, thank you for all that, Maria. How about you, Amanda? How does these phases resonate with you?
It's interesting because I think about the older women that have been the influences in my life, and not to sugarcoat it, but we're not talking about extraordinarily active women. Like there have been moments where either illness or issues or whatever have just become a stumbling block between them and the lives that they kind of describe them wanting to live, but it not really happening. So when I would talk to these people, they'd kind of set me up and say, well, Amanda, you may really like doing this, but maybe you want to go for something safer. Maybe you want to go for something safer, over and over again. And I would see examples every once in a while. And it was like the shining beacon of an older woman who was doing something that they loved. But this was a rarity. And this was not meant for me. This is meant for that person who just happened to have that moment, like a celebrity or something like that. Right. And so what's been really interesting about joining your org, honestly, the On Purpose Women Global Community, is having this wonderful palette of women who are coming together and saying, these are the experiences I'm having, this is what I'm doing, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, oh, like these were not the women that were in my life, some, but not like a broad swath. So now that when you read something like what you just read, it makes a lot more sense to me. Whereas before having experiences with an intergenerational group, I was like, well, is this just fanciful thinking? Am I supposed to go through this process and then really just hit it at like 50 and, just kind of churn? Like what's happening here? So that has been very helpful to me. But yeah, I'm not sure, like, I think I'm just going to stammer here. Let me just give this a second thought. Nope, I think that's the thought. I think that's the full thought. It's cool to see that the process doesn't stop at 40. You're not supposed to accomplish it by 40. And then the rest of it is like, we'll see.
Yeah, because that was the message, again, my dad worked at this one company his entire life, retired in a good place. And they moved to the coast of North Carolina and they played golf. And, that looked like what it was supposed to look like. My dad was 62 when he retired. My mom was 57. And, they did volunteer work and things like that, but there were no real aspirations to do something new and different.
Yeah.
And I remember how fearful my mother was. Like when I left my first husband, I was 33. And she's like, well, are you going to live alone? She was so fearful for me to have this life in my 30s that she couldn't have imagined having. And so we didn't have, you're all, I mean, Amanda, to have women in front of you now doing that is just, I want to be one of those women for younger women. Imagine, we're
You
that
are.
20 years away kind of thing. And I think the only person that I remember growing up, I adored her. She was our neighbor. She was my second mom. She was slightly younger than my mother, but she would take us in the woods hiking, and she would point out the snakes and tell us about them and tell us how not to get bothered by them. And my mother would see a snake from 30 feet and would run in the house and leave me as a little kid out there. She would run in and shut the door. She was so terrified. This woman, Mrs. Pavlich was her name. She used the good china for her and her husband. Their children had left home already. She burned the good candles. And that was in the 50s. Women didn't do that. They saved things. Even if we had nice things, we didn't have to save them, but my mother saved them. And I just learned some of the most interesting things from Mrs. Pavlich of how to, and it wasn't as much about aging as it was about being a woman, about being a brave, courageous woman and kind of being different. She was as comfortable in a pair of old jeans and a flannel shirt as she was in an evening gown. And she would do both with grace. And she's, I think about her often. She's still alive. She's almost 100 now. Wow. And so, Sophia, I want to hear your thoughts about this whole phase process.
Well, it's nice that there's so much room in the first phase. Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't switch over until what, like 50, 60? Yeah, that's really like a long time. So I got like loads of time. And it's interesting because the different stages, I almost feel like, because my mom had passed and I was told it was like 29. I don't even know the age, but once I hit 30, I was like, I definitely passed it. I almost wonder if I kind of crunched some of those phases into the mix of my 20s, like trying to do it, if internally I felt like that was my clock, then I had to get the whole cycle in there. So I feel like I did a bunch of that, but then it was like, oh, I have this extra time. And now the model is, I have all of this extra time, but sometimes when you have so much time, it like immobilizes you because then there's all the choices. So I do feel like that the questions, like this phase is all about questions, like that definitely resonates. But it is exciting to see just how much like beautiful things are ahead, should I have the privilege of getting to be those ages. So that's really inspiring. I really like that. Yeah.
Thank you. And I feel like I'm living all four phases right now, actually. I still, in those quiet moments, say, okay, who am I? What do I want next? Who's she going to be this year? What do I want to expand? What do I want to bring forth? Because I'm not done yet. We're all in this work in progress. We're in this creative space. And so I just love the fact that there's 4 really cool phases here we can all dance in, no matter our age, right?
I like that idea. Yeah. And I like how you keep talking about kind of like, who's she going to be, because I've recently started thinking about myself in the future or my best self. And I call this like my mermaid self, just because that's fun. But like that whole idea of like, who's the me that I want to be? And what would she be doing? What is she doing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
because we have to be our model for ourselves, right? Like it's not just copying somebody else and what their path is, really trying to make sure that when we look back at the end of our life, we're like, I did all that great stuff. I'm so happy.
Yeah.
But one of the things that what you're saying about all 4 categories, that is a man-made category. And I refuse to allow any man, whether they are president of the United States or anybody else or my dad, to define how I'm going to be at any age. It's always about the boxes and the dualities and the polarities and all of that. I label myself as a bodacious, brilliant, beautiful, badass queen. And that to me means that I own my voice. I wasn't able to before because I was waiting for somebody else's permission to do all those things that you just talked about. I no longer have to do that because I feel that the creator that created me wants me to continue to blossom and to unbecome all of those things that we have as women to be wife, mother, or aunt, or whatever it is that we need to be. I have thrown all of that out and I'm a badass.
I think that's so great. I love the sort of dream the possibilities. I feel like you get old, whatever old is, when you stop dreaming the possibilities.
Yes.
That really resonated with me, that both you said and Sophia said, like when you can't see what she's going to be next, what, meaning you, like, what are you going to be next? Then that sort of, I think, then brings about old age, because now you're settled, whatever
Yes.
that piece is. And I think it's different to be settled for a time than to be settled forever. And I think that, I wasn't married when I was 40. And I remember meeting an older woman who I loved, was our neighbor, who said to me, you're probably gonna, it's a great, so like casually, well, you're probably gonna die alone. And I was like, well, I hope I'm not going to die soon. And I'm not sure alone is about being married, right? I think that I have a very full friend and family base. And but I think that it was at that moment where I'm like, well, I guess I hadn't really thought about the fact that I wasn't married at 40. It was sort of a funny thing. And I think that for me, it's about when you can see what there could be next. Like every day I'm like, oh, what if I could do that? Well, somebody should be doing that. I'm like, oh, well, maybe that could be me, like whatever that is. And I think engaging fully in community and choices and learning from people that are very different than you. Like I think that when I met women, and Jimmy, your group was one of the first groups where I met women who had a second life, right? Who had an after, whatever the after was, whether, regardless of the age, that they had some life that they lived, maybe raising kids, doing whatever, and now they're doing something else, or they had a career with one thing and are doing something else, that really allowed me to think that whatever I choose today can really be about today, and that there can be another day that's 10 years from now or 5 days from now that can be entirely different. And when you meet and have those role models and people that especially women, frankly, because those choices haven't been always available, it allows you to start seeing your own possibilities for aging well differently and aging with purpose differently. Because how any of us define aging with purpose today could look different, 6 months from now, 6 years from now, 6 decades from now, right? So I think it's about, when you stop becoming curious about what that future can look like, I think that shuts down the spirit. And then the spirit is what keeps us all kind of getting up and doing the next thing in the day. And engaging with people who support that is a key piece of sort of aging well, living well, doing your own thing, whatever that looks like.
I agree. And some of you have mentioned role models or not, or a lack of role models, but does anybody come to mind for you that you kind of watched? Maybe it could have been a celebrity, maybe, but you watched somebody maybe from afar, or somebody in your family or your community that was maybe just, 10 years, 20 years ahead. And you were going, oh, I really want to do it like that, because they were different from everybody else that you saw around you. Anybody come to mind?
Yeah, I have one. There's I don't even remember her name right now, but there's an Italian talk show host star woman who I just gives me an idea of maybe kind of how my mom would have turned out if she had reached 40. And it's really interesting because she's somebody who has she's very articulate. So I love the sound of her voice. It's very melodic, and she has like great style, and she's very charismatic and warm. And I just appreciate that, even though she's like a famous persona, like just her with her kids celebrating their birthday, talking about how much she loves them. It's just like really cool to see that, because my mom is Italian, to see that those qualities together, like the Italian woman at 40 being awesome, so that was cool to see for me, just that like a little bit of a different flavor.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Well, one of the things that I think about Amanda Gorman, who did the poem for, well, she's a role model for me. Okay. And because I'm a poet and I love to write, and she expresses things, and she's all in vogue and doing lots of writing, lots of wonderful things. She's a role model for me. The one before that was Maya Angelou, because Maya Angelou, it was a actor, she was a poet, she was a great writer, and did all those things. So she was the one. In my family, it was my Aunt Ruby. And Aunt Ruby is now 81 years old, and she's still a role model, because when she used to go to Atlantic City, work every summer, and come back and had all these pretty clothes. And I used to wear them to school, and I always wanted to be that. And she used to recite the Creation, the piece of James Weldon Johnson's Creation. She could recite it. word for word. I mean, she loves poetry. And she was my role model growing up. But now she's still my role model because of the fact that she supports me in being more than any other women that has done in my family, because she's very proud of me expressing myself. And she's a role model because her health is not just you, somebody, I think it was Maria, you talked about health. So I use that as a way to inspire me to take care of myself physically, emotionally, and spiritually for what she's going through. And she's not taking care, has not taken care of her body, and she's on a decline. I gave her a gift. I bought her a journal so that she could start journaling about the things that were happening to her, because I know she has a lot of wisdom that needs to be shared. So I use her as a role model now. And also to my daughter. Now, my daughter would tell me, well, look, Mom, you're not going to act like the other people when you get old. You're not getting, look, you can't do that. You have, or if I wear anything, my daughter would tell, look, Mom, no, we're not going that way. So those are the combination of people that inspire me. And I now have become that in my family and for the community. So I do this not for them, but for myself, to set an example of how you can do no matter where you come from, no matter what you're going through, being wife, being mother, lived all these different places. I learned from that. And it makes me who I am to bring me to this moment where I am right now, talking about this process of still unbecoming and still flourishing and flowering.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. When I was in my 30s, I was in my corporate career. I think at that point I was an assistant vice president of this banking financial institution. And we got into the habit at work of going out after work on Friday nights to the local bar. And we had a new director a woman who was in our office. And I went into her office. It was her first week there. It was Friday. And I invited her to come with us. And she smiled, and she very sweetly kind of said, thank you so much for inviting me, but that's not how I want to spend my evening. And I remember feeling like somebody just kicked me in the chest, because I was like, I acted all cool. And I said, okay, thanks. And I walked around, and a part of me was like calling her names in my head, and the other part was like feeling hurt. And then all of a sudden I heard myself, or I thought this, I want to be her when I grow up. Because she was so clear on her boundaries. She was so clear of what she wanted to do and what she didn't want to do. Because at that stage in my life, I was saying yes to everything and doing very little of it. I would say yes to going out and knowing I wasn't going to go, and knowing I was going to lie about why I wasn't going. She didn't have to do any of that. She just said, no, thank you. And what she did was, without saying it, she said, you need not ask me again. So every Friday night, she didn't have to make up a story or tell us why she couldn't go. And I admired that so much that I held on, 40 years later, I can't tell you who she was or what she looked like, but I remember what she said, and how I always held that in front of me, is I want to have that kind of courage and self-confidence one day to be able to speak that truth. And that was really big for me. Role model, Maria, other than the woman who said you'd die alone, that wasn't.
Okay. It's interesting. I sort of have a combination of folks too, but I have it's funny, my grandmother, who passed away when she was young too, although of course I didn't realize it was young then. I thought everyone was old that was older than me. But I remember her, I never even knew my grandfather. She had 2 husbands and both of them had passed. So by the time I was old enough to remember, and she had like a yellow in her, I don't know, she was old in my mind, had this yellow, bright yellow, like, I don't know, like not a sports car, but like, I don't know, some kind of car that I felt like a 60-some-year-old woman shouldn't be driving, right? And she would she had these ladies that she hung out with, that she did her own thing, and she had, and I realized my mom learned that from her, because my mother had like the card party ladies. They once a month played cards, and I realized they never really played cards. Like, it was the old version of the book club. They really had they talked about the kids and whatever. I just know I liked card party night because they did their own thing, and we could eat snacks and stay up late and all those things. But those ladies, I remember my mom and her friends, these 4 ladies, and then my grandmother and her 4 lady friends, that were like a different path of like a side of women that I didn't really see. It was like a side of my mother that I didn't see on a normal day, when she was like making us do the rules and going to school, and she was cleaning, cooking, and balancing the checkbook. and I realized that then they were telling me about possibilities, right? They were telling me that their norm, like, so back in the day, this is a little secret. So they had, they were drinking Seagram 7, like it's like a whiskey or what, I don't know what it is, but, and they drank it with 7-Up. So it was Seagram 7 and 7. And they like pass along this bottle to the next card party. They got a big gallon thing or whatever, and they passed it along. And it was really the only time I remember my mom having like a cocktail, right? I remember my dad having like beer at night, but I didn't really, and I thought, this is a new path where ladies just have like a get together and talk and enjoy their lives and play some cards and like do things that were different than the traditional role that I knew of in women and that I had seen. I think that being able to see even that slight insight is a role model in a different way. It wasn't really about the career, about my direction, but it was around, wow, even within the confines of whatever environment you're living in, you can cheat a little, right? You can create your own subworld. You can create it with your own little group, even if it's not ready to play out on the bigger stage. And I look back at the time when my mom was doing that and when my grandmother was doing that, women didn't have the choices. Like it wasn't acceptable. And I think how kind of radical that was at a different time. You know, now we wouldn't think anything of it, but I think that's kind of amazing. And then we have a woman here at Keswick who's 112 years old, and she didn't even come to us until she was 90 some. And she said the only reason she had to come was because her son or nephew who was helping her was like 75 and he was getting too old to take care of her, help her. So, but she talks about like, you know, living on her own terms. And when I met her 8 years ago, when I got here, I was like, wow, like she's still talking about that. How great is that? And she is still living on her own terms here, you know? And I feel like that consistency of meeting women who in their own way defined what living on their own terms was within whatever the confines or parameters or choices that were available to them. Like, I want to be that woman for other people, you know, for the next generation to say like, you know, find your path, you know, find your joy, what makes your heart sing, find it earlier than I did, you know, and I think that that's the gift that we can give to the next generation.
Yeah. Okay, before we wrap up, I have one more question. So answer this briefly, but I'd like to hear what you have to say. I'm going to start with Sophia. Sophia, what would you say to a woman your age who fears aging?
I think that the thing a couple of you guys have mentioned that I will word as giving yourself a season, you know, to you can only think so far ahead because you're going to be changing and who you are in the future is going to be different. So if there's something that you're needing right now to assuage your fears about aging or anything else, like to see it as a seasonal thing. Like in this season, I'm going to rest more and I'm going to say no to things, you know, and that might change. And then later on, maybe you're physically doing better or you'll make different choices. But to really, I would say like the thing, especially being in this first stage where so much is sort of undetermined about the future, is like give yourself the permission to fully immerse yourself and go really deep into whatever season you're in, and don't think about it needing to be permanent. Just give yourself permission to dive into it, and when the time comes to change seasons, like just allow yourself to do that and, you know, take it bit by bit.
Very wise. Thank you. Amanda.
There was so much wisdom in that. That was really well done.
Thanks.
I think that there are just a lot of preconceived notions that have been pumped into our head by the patriarchy. Boom, right? And there's so much garbage. I mean, and not to look, you got to feel how you're going to feel, right? If something's drooping, if something's wrinkling, if it makes you feel better to do something about it, have at, right? In my humble, but I think it's important to consider why you're doing it. I think there's just there are a lot of messages out there about the way you're supposed to look, the way you're supposed to feel, the things you're supposed to do. I am younger than Jennifer Aniston. I will never look like Jennifer Aniston. That's not the ideal. It can't be the ideal. It has to be me. It has to be who I am, where I am right now. And if I'm talking to somebody who's like, well, you know, I'm getting old, boom, 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 I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. It's like, well, focus in on what you're doing. Do what you can do to make yourself feel as good as you can right now, whatever that is, and just keep going. We can't get hung up on what other people think. It's got to be what we're feeling in here.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Great wisdom. Maria.
I think my thought is if you're not aging, then what are you doing? Like, there is no alternative. You're either getting older or you're gone. So my grandmother used to say similarly, every day this side of the dirt's a good day. And I feel like if not now, when? Embrace the next you and learn from it and just enjoy that phase, because who knows how long that will be.
Mhm. And Amanda, you're so right about the messages. Just even still, there's still so much out there. I was going to watch this program on it was all these holistic doctors and these people I admire out there doing all this work, but the title was anti-aging. And it's like, I don't like that phrase because it implies there's something wrong with aging. Want to fight it, want to, no, let's not go there. And so, the whole I guess vernacular around aging needs to shift. And I think we're the ones to do it. We're the ones to use the different languaging and to not talk about, oh, I'm getting old. And, oh, that just happens when you get older. You get aches and pains and everything falls down. And it's like, well, maybe that happens sometimes and maybe it doesn't. Or what do we do with it when it does? Do we lament? Do we complain? Do we wish it wasn't so? Or do we just go with this, man, this is what's working really well for me today? And Imaja, I want to hear what you would say to a woman in her 70s, because I'm sure you know some who lament, who are fearful, who just don't see anything down the road.
Well, what I would say, first of all, is to embrace the totality of who you are as a human being. Mm-hmm. Embrace the totality of all your feelings and embrace the totality of all your experiences that you've had and the lessons that you bring forward with you. Embrace the totality of who you are and live from inside out. Embrace the moment and be in the moment and seek the guidance of what brings you joy and have that childlike innocence. Like Sophia is the youngest one on here. Have that childlike innocence for always opening up yourself to the newness, because life is never the same every day. And that's what I enjoy. Embrace change. Embrace it. Don't fight the changes. Just embrace them and embrace everything that you are. And most of all, love yourself no matter where you are. And then you can be who you are and bring who you are and be on purpose.
I think she's brought us full circle. What do you think? Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful words. Before we wrap up, we're going to do this in just a minute. I want to go around to each of you and just tell our listeners if you have something coming up, if you've got, a little bit about your business, just take 30 seconds or so, and how they might get in touch with you if they want to know more about what it is that you do. Sophia, how about you?
Sure. If you want to keep in touch and get free access to workshops that I do and other fun things, sophiawren.com/news is my newsletter. Just make sure to spell it SOFIAWREN. And and I'm excited to have some free workshops and collaborations this year. I'm also interested in finding new collaborators.
Thank you. Amanda.
Well, if you need help with a website that has gone awry, if you're a small business and you need some support with what's going on digitally, websites, social media, in ads and digital papers, anything like that, you can find me at mendeddigital.com. It's like fixing, mendeddigital.com, 2 Ds. And that's where you can find me and reach out. Thank you.
Maria, say a little bit about the Wise and Well Center.
Great. So the Wise and Well Center is both in person here in Baltimore, but also virtually all around the world. And so you can find us at chooskeswick.org and click on Community Health and Wise and Well. And there's programs that do many of the things we talked about today, from wellness to pure health to social engagement to educational programming as well. And so our goal is to help you live well, age well, and be well.
And let me just thank Maria and Keswick, because they are our inside front cover advertiser in the magazine. So if you didn't catch that, go to On Purpose Woman and look at that ad right on the inside cover. And Imaja, what about you? You have so much going on.
Yes. First of all, you can reach me through Messenger on Facebook, or, just send me a direct message. My website is under construction. And as I engage in being an inspirational speaker, I am a poet for hire. And I've written for some of the people here. It's a poem to introduce the book. I write from that. I write something specifically that's for whatever is coming up. Also, what I have coming up that's exciting, I and my partner and I, Elroy Boyd III, have written a play about Martha Hyde's life, who sung with James Brown for 32 years. That play will premiere contingent upon what happens with these variants in August here in Richmond at the Firehouse Theater, the first 2 weekends in August. So I'm in process doing recruitment for people to participate in that. We have auditions coming up with that. And I'm also writing articles on microaggressions that are going to be appearing in certain papers according to what has happened to me in my life as far as racism is concerned. I write for the Charlotte Gazette. I also write for The Narrative, which is an online paper. You can find my articles in there. And also from time to time, I appear on certain forums to discuss things because I participated in the March on Washington. I grew up under Jim Crow. So now I'm sharing my experience, strength, and hope. I got a new book coming out, a new poetry book coming out called She, He, and Oneness. And it's about for the first time I've ever did anything with a male artist who's expressing through art to come up with my poetry. And another book called Love Notes for Your Soul, which I'm going to be working with a youth organization for girls, for young Black girls, to do the art for that book. So I got quite a bit going on. Oh, and one other thing, I just got selected today for my first play, was called Couldn't Keep It to Myself. The National Black Theater Network is going to be putting it up, and I'll tell you all about it. I just got that this morning. That's the first play that I wrote. It's going to have certain section, and I'll be answering things because it's about my life. That's going to be coming up real soon.
Oh, I'm so glad I had you go last, because you're 75, Imaja, and you're creating all over the place. So if that isn't a role model for all of us, to just know the possibilities, it's not like, oh, we need to do it the way Imaja is doing it. We just need to know that it's out there. Yes. And that there are no more restrictions, no more rules, no more games that we have to play. We just go for what feels right for us in the moment. And thank you for that. Thank you all for being with me today. And I'm going to just wrap this up by thanking our viewers for joining us for the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show. And if you love this interview and want to share it with your friends, it's going to be on our YouTube channel in the next 48 hours. This is over, well, we're doing this not live right now, so it's going to be over on Facebook in just a little bit. So you can go over to the On Purpose Woman Global Community YouTube channel and subscribe and get all of our notifications there. We've probably got close to 100 really great interviews with real women who have real purpose, talking about real life. Our next interview is next Tuesday, February 8th, when I'll talk with Laura Defranco, the founder of Brave Healer Productions, about who I am is not what I do. So thank you again for watching the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, y'all.
Yeah, thank you.